in the winter if we're here on a weekend and in the winter if we're here on a weekend and
assumed that because you were now a member of the
That's
committee.
okay. It's not my first
Good.
rodeo on Zoom, so I
Well,
learned
thank
my
you
way
for being
around.
here. Thank you for being here. Dave, is it about time to start? Okay, good. And when you have a moment, or maybe a little bit farther down the line, we'll see how many people are attending. Some sort of head count. Okay, and we'll double check maybe a little later on to see, because I think we found quite a bit more showed up at the last meeting after a little bit later on. All right. Tonight, welcome to the Beach Advisory Committee. This is a meeting we set up to talk primarily about the issues of traffic and safety, and the report that was issued by the Traffic and Safety Subcommittee that we started discussing, did some brainstorming about at our last meeting. But before we get going, let's just do a roll call. And let's see, John.
Here.
Paul.
I'm here.
Gary.
Here.
Carol.
Here.
Ed.
Here.
Okay, and I am here. So we have a quorum. Jen Wasserman and Joanne Guston had both advised in advance that they could not be here, couldn't attend tonight. So we do have a quorum for this meeting, so we can have a legitimate meeting. I will point out, though, that if we are looking to take any votes or pass any motions, that we will need, we still need an agreement among at least 5, a majority of the full committee rather than just of the people who are here tonight. So, okay. So tonight we're not be dealing with any minutes or anything like that. We're going right forward into the issues of the Traffic and Safety Subcommittee. We've all had Barry and Tom and Art put together, I think it's primarily Barry, a compilation and another draft of their report, which Barry, do you want to speak to it briefly? It's a more compact, more focused on what might happen in the near future as opposed to longer term solutions.
Yep. Thanks very much, Kate. So what we took away from the last meeting was, let's get a little bit more focused. Let's try to look at what is realistic for summer 2022. What can we get done that will help things? To that end, I put together a much shorter document that's a little bit more bullet point and a couple of things that we can discuss and then move forward on if we so feel. I'd had a number of people in the community who've reached out, and I very much appreciate it, with their ideas, and spent some time on the phone with them. I also, the one comment I just want to really make, I think there was some concern from people that either we were going to increase the amount of parking available at the beach or decrease the amount. People were concerned one way or the other, and I just want to reassure that whatever we're doing here, it's to keep exactly what we currently have, but find a safer and more efficient way of perhaps doing it. So that's sort of the overriding factor. I didn't want people concerned that, oh, how's this going to, all of a sudden we're going to have another 50 people here at the beach or whatever. It won't be from any of these changes that we're going to talk about. So
Barry, may I make a quick statement to that, and so that I'm sure you're aware of this, but this might make a little easier for you to explain it to people. The number of parking spaces at the beach is fixed by the agreement, so it's right. Beyond any of our control, whether the Board of Selectmen or the Beach Advisory Committee, to change that anyhow. So you're absolutely correct in that.
And I can also point out on that regard that thanks to the beach use agreement, there's also limitations on whether anybody can be brought in by any form of public or, collective transportation. So it's not just, we can't increase the numbers physically located at the beach. We can't, I think at one point, one suggestion that was thrown out there, as many suggestions were, just as talking points, was the possibility of offsite parking that would be then somehow people would be brought in from that offsite. And that is, again, not something that can happen very easily or at all under the beach use agreement.
I don't think there's any stomach for that on the Board of Selectmen either.
Yeah.
So
right.
I wouldn't stay up worrying about that one.
Right. So that's on the plan B, which we're not even going to talk about tonight. So
no, I like what you put together, Barry. Thank you for trimming that up. That's great.
Okay, so without further ado, I thought what I would do is just introduce one subject, invite any discussion, any comments from our group, and then of course from the larger group on the phone. And if we can agree at that point, we can move on, agree or disagree. Either way, move on to the next point. So the first one I had on the list was landscaping, construction, maintenance vehicles must park on private property rather than park along the roads where parking is prohibited. I'll leave it at that. I think it's self-explanatory as to why we would want to do that, and invite any comments from anyone on the phone.
That's simply a matter of us enforcing our own ordinances, Barry. You're spot on with that.
I assume they could park in a designated parking space if there was space.
What do you mean by designated? You mean in
Part of the 100, and if they had a decal, and it was required at that time of the year that they could park in a designated parking space on the public road.
so they take 2 decals because they're pulling a trailer?
They could fit in one parking space for one
I,
vehicle.
yeah, I don't see that.
I'm just saying, if they could fit
If
Paul,
can
I think
fit,
you
they
are
could.
correct. If they could put if they have one pickup truck or one vehicle and
Right.
they buy a sticker like any of the rest of us, they're no different.
right.
But they certainly couldn't park their trailer, double park, if you will.
Okay.
And I do, in fact, think that some people do that come do early morning jobs, particularly along Kings Highway. Not that I'm there very much early in the morning, but the few times I have been, I have seen, vehicles that are clearly work vehicles parked in some spaces because the spaces are reasonably open at that early morning. And that's probably one solution for them, for those who are right down on the beach. But it still applies to the back streets too. And obviously, you don't have just parking spaces back there other than on people's private property. I'm fully in favor of this, of enforcing this. I know it's going to be difficult because many more of us, and I include myself in that category, use these services, and the services are more complex. When we first built our house and 20 some odd years ago, we're still using the same guy who's done a great job for all these years, but it was one pickup truck that he brought. Put the back down, put a ramp up, and brought his lawnmower down. And now he too has much more equipment that he brings. So I think that the size of people's equipment, with toys, whatever you want to call them, has expanded, and we have a much more complicated problem. Which
But it only applies to public roads, not private roads like you live on.
well, yeah, technically, because
Yeah.
there's nothing that gets enforced back on our private roads, except for the right of people to come, according to the GPS systems, right through whenever they want to. But that's a
So I think everybody supports this on the committee.
Yeah,
From
but
the-
what are we asking? Again, it's already
We're just
policy.
we're just going to ask. My suggestion is you just ask the town enforce its own ordinance, and you won't be the only one. There are folks on North Street who have asked the same question. I have asked the same question, and I haven't got the answers that I wanted. So it's time, that if we all ask, and it comes from multiple sources.
even better.
Yeah, we can't ignore it, especially as the beach is. There's been some contentious issues down there. I don't have to remind anybody about all the money the town spent to prove they owned the beach.
Mhm.
We don't need to be fighting battles that shouldn't have to be fought in the first place when we have ordinances in place to deal with them.
I agree.
It's just
Right.
a simple matter of enforcement.
I agree. Okay, then. And when we discuss some of the other ones, instead of making a motion for each item that we here to come to agreement on, let's work through and perhaps do one motion at the end of recommendations. Is that everybody okay with that?
It creates an omnibus as long as we all agree, right, to move, put it on the omnibus.
Yes.
Okay, so let's.
I'm
move
going to tell you that I probably won't vote tonight unless you need the 5th vote, because it is going to go to the Board of Selectmen.
Yeah.
But if I don't agree with anything tonight, I will speak up and just not out of trying to be obstinate, because God knows I can do that. But
Really?
just, to facilitate it. As I said, my job here, I believe, is a facilitator to make
Okay.
sure that the things that come from the Goose Rocks Beach Committee, fall on receptive ears at the Board of Selectmen.
Great.
We need 5, don't we?
5,
votes?
even with,
Yeah.
unless we all just, the 5 remaining 5
Yeah,
agree.
Great.
We will,
If you need 5, I will vote, but other than that, I'll probably just abstain.
Well, we need you for 6, so I think we're good for 5.
Okay, good.
we're
Perfect.
good. And we love your input anyway. We
Right on.
appreciate your input very much, so.
Hey, Kate, are we going to take public comments issue by issue?
Yeah.
And if so,
good point.
and if so, how do people participate?
That's a good point. Okay, my inclination is to leave this until we take public comments at the end of when we've put together our thoughts and let people come in unless people feel differently. But I think that giving everybody else out there in the community to have input, when we've come to what we think is a consensus on this, but that doesn't mean that we wouldn't get some input. But I think doing the input all together at the end after we've gone over the points that Barry wants to make or put out there.
That makes sense to me.
Okay. All right, Barry, next point.
Okay, so next point is deploying occasional use of the speed monitor on the west end of Kings Highway. Continue the speed monitor on Dyke Road and New Biddeford Road. Nothing changes there. And then the issue came up earlier whether or not we need our own, which becomes costly, etc. But even if we decide not to get our own or ask for that, at least move it down to the west end on occasion, just so that people have something to think about.
Where would you put it?
Yeah,
Probably halfway down, and it could move. It doesn't have to be in the same spot every time.
But the critical issue are people moving quickly from the lack of parking at the far west end to try to find a new spot. Is that your feeling?
And that would be part of it. And, there's also some people that just speed. And there's also some of the big trucks that come through that, whether or not they're going 30 miles an hour in a 20-mile-an-hour zone or not, we'll find out with the speed trap.
yeah.
Not really.
Don't call it a speed trap, Barry.
It's not a trap.
Call it a speed monitor.
I didn't hear that.
Yeah.
Okay, a monitor.
Reminder.
Barry, how many parking spaces are on the west end?
4.
Maybe not, this is not a discussion for tonight, but maybe in the future, we could find another place for those 4, and then you wouldn't have to worry about people going down there. And just say no public parking.
Violent agreement.
I mean, I just think from an administrative point of view, it makes so much more sense. And then we could put big signs up across from Butts's store or whatever they call it these days. You can tell how much I get to Goose Rocks these days, but by the general store and say no parking on this end, no outlet, no parking.
Yeah, or public parking left.
Yeah, it's interesting because Carol raised a point that I hadn't even thought about, that she'd seen some studies on the fact that when you come up to an intersection, such as the T intersection, that most people, unless they have specific information about which way to go, tend to turn right. And I can agree to that because I try to avoid left turns, particularly at intersections if at all possible. So that would mean that putting up something, and so people would tend to, that don't know the beach perhaps, would tend to turn right thinking they're going to look for parking down there when they have to drive a mile to find out there are only 4 spaces and they're already filled. So I think that the idea, which isn't specifically related to the issue we're talking about the speed monitors now, really is a good idea to put up something that says parking to the left. Now, my other thought
I
going
can't
forward-
believe, Kate, you have asked to put another sign.
I know, just a little one.
I know,
Yeah,
but we'll,
that-
no,
that
it
comes up-
will. We'll get a good looking one. Fred Stafford's already working on it.
Yeah, that comes up on my next page.
Okay,
But
so
it addresses the same issue. How do we cut down that speeding, the mile down and the mile back on the west end? I personally think putting up a sign that says general parking or main parking with a left will, at least the people that are coming for the day trippers, the people that are not regulars will turn left, and they're going to have 160 69 of the 173 spots available versus 4. Paul?
Ed, there are clam beds down there, so
Yeah.
one argument for keeping them, keeping
But
some.
I don't believe so. I don't believe that any of that is open. And the clamming that traditionally takes place on Goose Rocks are hen clams, not soft shell clams. And that's usually out by Dinghy Point from there, out in front of the tides, working your way to the east.
I
And
think
that's
the
done in the
bed-
winter. Done in the I go down in the winter and do it if I feel like it. You need and it's very specific. You need a real low run of tide, because unlike the soft shell clams, the steamer clams, they don't show themselves at a low water.
Mhm.
So you need a real drainer, as the old timers would say. And then you go out with a big pitchfork and you poke around with your toes and you feel them and you dig them out that way.
Yeah.
So I think that because of the issues that we're having with the water quality at both ends of the river, or both ends of the beach, because of the rivers, I don't think that those would even be open to harvest of soft shell clam.
Yeah, I think they were open early in the season and then they closed like June 15.
Yeah.
Anyway, a couple of people have mentioned that to me. I thought someone at the last meeting made a good suggestion for those 4 spots as to make them resident parking only. You have to have a Kennebunkport resident parking decal on your car, and then you could put that sign up to say public parking left.
Mhm.
And
But all the stickers, they don't differentiate.
Yeah, what's a resident sticker? I don't know what that means.
Yeah,
No,
it's just
they're different color.
no, they're the same color.
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
It's colored by year.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's colored by year, but not by. The only difference is if you, under our current system, and we're working on this, and we won't bring this one up tonight because we'll be here all night talking about it. But under the current system, you go in and you show your that you're a resident of the town, and then they write your license plate number on the sticker, and then you affix it to your rear window, and that's it. If I lived in Kennebunk, I could go in and pay the $200 for the year, or if I'm here for the week, pay, I can't recall what the weekly fee is. It's probably still $200. And they'll still write down your plate number and give you an identical sticker, but it might have an expiration on it.
Yeah, I
Those
think
would
they
be the
have an
only difference.
expiration if you're here, you're buying a 1 week or a 1 month.
Yes, they must, indeed.
Maybe that's why I know, because of course, getting a residence one year round, that, hasn't no expiration.
And when you get at the kiosk, you don't even get, you get a printout slip, right?
Yeah, that you put on your dashboard, I gather.
So nobody really does that at the West End, I'd imagine, because it's a long way from the kiosk to get a.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I don't want to take away, I want to go back to Barry's, the quote, point 2, and get some idea of whether we have a consensus on that. But I do think the issue of making the 4 lonely spaces at the West End be somehow for residents only. It's nice to be give the town, it's still considered public parking because there are 3,000 of us residents. And I would still argue that that's public parking, but of limited nature, and would be nice to, number one, stop a whole lot of people from whipping up and down that street. Direct people more towards where there really is 169 of the parking spaces are.
The sign that just says public parking to the left. I
Yeah.
mean,
Right.
Yeah,
that
I
does
think
it.
from a pragmatic point of view, I think that makes the most. That's where I would, if it were up to me, that's where I would start.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
see how
I
that
agree.
goes.
Yeah.
I think it addresses a couple of the issues, and in a nice way that is inclusive.
Okay.
And if we totally remove the parking from the other end, there may be the impression by some of the people who don't live at Goose Rocks that now we've made that whole end of the beach private.
Exactly.
Yeah, Ed, to be perfectly
And I think
honest,
we know where the lawsuit started on that end of the beach.
Exactly.
yeah, and Ed, I will say, I live at the extreme end, right there. I
You
can
live
see
on
the
the west
spots.
end?
If I look out my window, I can see the 4 spots. And
Okay.
I agree with you. I don't think it would sit well with other people who are feeling that we're quote unquote pulling strings or we're
That's
being treated
fair.
differently. And
That's fair.
that
Yeah.
doesn't sit right with me.
That's fair.
Okay, all right.
Do
can
they
I-
fill up, Barry, in the summer, those spots?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Carol and I are right here.
Yep.
And in the winter, lots of people come down and walk their dogs.
Mhm.
And I would hate to give up those 4 spots. I think it would just, it would just not put on a good image that we,
Yeah.
So when we,
Parking's not a problem in the winter, but I'm good with that.
so we're in agreement, we would put up a sign at the end of Dyke Road with an arrow or something that says public parking left, public
Yeah.
parking.
It's got to be right in front of you as you come into that intersection.
Yeah.
By the
well,
community house sign,
oh,
there's a sign right in that same location for the GRBA, I think, which
Is
is a
there a
nice,
stop sign there at the end before you turn left to Kings
No,
Highway?
there's no stop sign. That's
It's
not
not-
a stop.
It's a yield sign that they put in the middle of the crosswalk. It's a temporary, in fact, yield sign in the summer, because I've always thought it should be a stop sign. But there is a telephone pole directly in your line of
Right,
sight. You
yeah.
step down at that
No place
intersection.
to mount it. Okay.
it's a good location.
Yeah.
Good
it would be
location.
So,
Okay,
all right, wait a minute, we've jumped, do we have a consensus on the second point Barry raised of recommending deploying a speed monitor, either one that the town already has or one that the town may consider buying for, we're not recommending one way or the other on that, for Goose Rock's Beach, at least for this summer, to deploy it more frequently at the beach, either at New Bedford Road, Dyke Road, or somewhere on the west end?
Yeah. Yeah. I think the way I would phrase it is continue with New Bedford Road. From what I've heard from folks, that's well received and it works. Use it on Dyke Road. We've also heard that that's been effective. And on occasion, not regularly,
Right.
but on occasion, just once in a while, move it into the West End, see if that helps.
Okay. All right.
It seems like it
And I-
lives in Cape Porpoise a lot, so I think we could give it up.
Thank you.
You guys could have it a little bit more often.
Thank
it
you.
was at Goose Rocks an awful lot last year.
Yeah, at Dyke Road, it was great. We used it for recycling. I think it's very effective, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, it's something the town may consider in the future purchasing, but I wouldn't suggest that we purchase one for Goose Rocks. Again,
I agree.
I don't want people to think that Goose Rocks is some special entity. And I mean, we have this committee, but I'd rather just see it purchased town-wide and spread around.
Mhm.
I agree.
Right, so we're agreed that what we'll recommend is that the town continue to deploy, or perhaps more frequently deploy, the speed monitor in the Goose Rocks Beach area, particularly on New Bedford Road, Dyke Road, and occasionally on the west end of Kings Highway. Do we agree on that? Informal.
Agreed.
Yes.
All right, so the third point is the third point we're now on. We've already done quite a bit of discussing the idea of a sign directing that public parking, people turn to the left of the east end of Kings Highway at the bottom of Dyke Road.
I think.
Yes.
Agreed.
That's the third item of agreement.
Yep.
Great. Okay, Barry, what's your next?
Okay, the next point I have, it may be redundant at this point, given what we've discussed, but increased police presence and enforcement, especially in the west end of Kings Highway. And I'm going to make the assumption here that if we take the other measures that we just discussed, that may just reduce the traffic sufficiently that we really don't need to have increased police presence there. I mean, there certainly is a police presence, not denying that. And I think the other may well cut down the traffic in a more meaningful manner. But again, open for discussion.
One question
I
I
think-
have is that we've got, when we say increased police presence, and I certainly am behind that. In the East End, we have the CSOs who are on the whole extent of the beach. But, and they are also on the street enforcing parking, I believe, on the East End. I don't know that they ever go and walk the streets on the West End, because again, they have no authority or ability to stop somebody down that appears to be speeding. Am I right? So I don't
Yeah,
know.
I don't think they're not police officers in the sense that the guys and gals that ride around in the cruisers.
Yeah.
They haven't
But
been to the criminal justice
They
academy.
don't have equipment to test the speed.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And one of our issues is manpower. You know, you go and talk to the chief, and you ask him about. I think he'd like to have another officer or two, because I do believe there's some vacancies, and we just can't find people. You know, we've all seen nationwide, backlash against the police, and we certainly, while we're much different than large cities, we certainly want to be selective in who we take on to represent our community and deal with the public. And the chief is very, very, he's very particular about who he hires, and I appreciate that.
right.
So, but if we try the sign measure, occasionally putting up the flashing sign, etc., see what results we get from that.
Yeah, I agree with that, Ed.
Okay, so am I taking away from that we're not at this point going to put forward any sort of recommendation or motion that we see an increased police presence or enforcement in the Goose Rocks Beach area, or we still want to do that?
I don't think we need to.
Okay,
Other than asking that they do enforce the parking, and
Right.
that they're there to do that. So that's a,
You could ask them to, talk to Kurt Moses, the assistant chief, and ask him if they'll just run a couple, traffic down there a couple of times a month or once a week or something, just to see what's going on the West End. If as the summer gets going, we find there are issues down there.
and I also think we've raised the question in the past that in the last discussion of to what extent are we enforcing parking by means of towing? Because I do remember that I believe that we recommended and the town adopted towing authority, which I was very surprised at the time to know that at that point, the police chief, the police department didn't even necessarily have that, but that they do now. So I don't know how often it's used, and I know we want to be visitor friendly, but sometimes.
I haven't heard of any instances of it. In fact, given my understanding of this is that it's very, very difficult because, it ties up an officer because you got to wait there until the record gets there, which can be whenever.
Yeah.
To tow. And I don't know how the actual procedure is. That's something you'd have to talk to
Okay.
The chief or Officer Moses about what. And I'm not recommending this tonight, but I now that I think about it and now that I know more about it, I think a boot would be better because you slap that on them and they're not going anywhere until they pay their fine.
that's what I've always thought, right?
Yeah, that's a good point.
But again, I don't want Kennebunkport to be known as, the boot town on the coast either.
My understanding was that was thought to be for egregious offenders. So on the third
I think
ticket,
so.
fourth ticket, you slap a boot, not the first or the second.
Right.
Yeah.
And
that
I don't
makes
want to
sense.
tow people necessarily on the first offense either.
No, not
But-
at all.
As far as that would go, that's something I would take up with the
Yeah.
officers, the chief,
Further
because they have so much more experience in that department, especially Chief Sanford. I'm sure they had to tow a lot of people when he was working up in Sanford as the assistant chief.
Okay, so we'll put that one as something. Carol, go ahead.
I just know when I see a sign that your car may be towed, that's pretty intimidating to me.
Mhm.
And that
Yeah.
may have
Yep.
as much effect as actually, towing the car. Just I know it's another sign, but I think those words
Yeah.
are pretty powerful. But
But put towing enforced underneath the public parking sign.
there you
There
go.
you go. I like that. Public
That's a-
parking, towing enforced.
Yeah.
I think that will make a big difference.
That's a 1-2 punch. Yep.
Okay, so we'll
And if
leave
not,
this
you can't fix stupid if they can't read that.
or decide they'll take a chance. But this is something, this is further discussion with, just with the police department. And we don't need to make this any part of a recommendation at this point to the selectmen, the town, correct?
We also talked on our last call, the concept of escalating fines for repeat offenders.
Mhm.
Is that something that anyone has an appetite for?
I would want to know whether we have that problem or not before we do that. Like, are the people who are just sticking their car anywhere without a decal or with a decal, are they, are they doing it once? They drive to the beach once and they do it? Or do we have repeat offenders? Someone drives 50 miles to get here and they say, I'm going to just park wherever the hell I can because I've got a boatload of kids in the back. And they do it once a summer. So I think the chief would probably have that data.
We have that data somewhere, because at the end of the year, we have to write off all the unpaid parking tickets. So we do have the data. And for the most part, from what I have seen, it's just been individuals, and most of them are people visiting. They're not locals.
They're like
We have
one-offs.
to deal with locals, residents or property owners.
Oh, it sounds to me like this, again, is another area to explore with the police department. For one thing, it's somewhat of an administrative matter. Do they have the capability of keeping those records? And certainly the person who's issuing, for example, a ticket to, this car from Delaware, do they know that this guy's been parking? At the time, they may not know that and they should write it for $50 or $100. So I think this is something to, be something to talk about with the police department as to what might work or not work.
See if the system's in place, if it even exists.
Yeah. I mean, I'm behind the idea, but I think we need to, before making any recommendation, that sounds like another list of things that either Barry's subcommittee or, whoever of us should just have a sit down and talk through with the police department.
And that would be a town-wide ordinance. If we have one, I'm sure we have something in place.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, the next point, and again, let's view it in light of what we've already agreed upon, striping on the west end of Kings Highway as well as Community House Road. And, the benefit there is that it's been quote unquote proven. I'm going to say Tom Adler, who's on the committee, has done work on this and is very is very much convinced that these things help. So that's something that we could do. It's non-intrusive in terms of speed bumps and other things that, create noise, etc.
Barry, just let me raise a question to make sure both all of us, which I think we understand, but certainly anybody listening, when you say striping, that's different from putting in, carving out a pedestrian/bicycle sort of mini lane. This is just running stripes down both sides of the roads where there are none now.
Exactly. It's one strip on the left side, one strip on the right side. And supposedly when you're driving, it gives you boundaries. It makes you feel that you're more confined and people go slower. That's what this science says.
Good for safety, because as we all know, it gets pretty foggy around here in the summertime.
Yeah.
And especially if you're driving at night, I always notice personally that it's nice to have that stripe down the side of the road when the visibility is bad.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that's gotten me home.
And there's no lights on the west end, correct? I mean, it's been a long time, or very few.
Very, very, very few.
Yeah.
Same on, I think the same pretty much in Community House on most of the back
Yeah.
roads.
Yeah. But
And
that's something you probably want to take up with Chris Simeone, but certainly something you can suggest to the Board of Selectmen.
Okay, so you see that as something that we could put it in a motion, a recommendation that they explore that as a possibility.
Explore that possibility, because that's something that highway, would ultimately do. And, again, we are limited on resources, but I think if they striped it, they wouldn't have to do it every single year. I don't think it's not going to wear off.
Okay.
But I'd like to hear Chris's opinions on it.
Okay, but we could put that forward as a suggestion that
Certainly.
We've recommended that it may both improve the visibility on the roads and help people.
Pedestrian safety.
And pedestrian safety. Okay.
Yeah.
Paul?
Yeah, I mean, we looked at this a couple of years ago, and then I did some research again, you know, as much as one can learn about these things. I'm not a traffic expert by any means, but, you know, many websites will tell you, here's how you calm traffic. And one of the common tools is narrowing the roadway so that people go slower. And I think that is generally what you're saying, but I'm not at all convinced that 2 lines effectively narrows the roadway. I would be in favor strongly of what we've done both on Dyke Road and New Biddeford Road to narrow the roadway. And that is to slow traffic, and that is to put in a pedestrian walkway, bikeway, which are extremely popular on both of those roads and has been very positive in terms of slowing the traffic on those roadways. And, you know, you can see the impact on walkers. People feel like, oh, it's sort of like if you build it, they will come. And now you see in those areas, people doing the complete loop, walking in those roadways, you know, on the side in the designated spaces, which are marked. And I just the other night, I took, after I read your report, I got out my Google map and I measured road widths all along the central part of Kings Highway. And then I measured it all on the west end. And, you know, I'm just guessing where the point is where the sidewalk hits. And I'm guessing where the point is where the white lines are for the parking. But we essentially have plenty of room for such a walking path or a biking path along the west end. The roadway now is 20 feet, pretty much steady all the way through in width. And if you take the whole central part of Kings Highway, you have about 16 feet. Wherever there are parking spaces, we have about 16 feet of drivable roadway. And anyone who drives in the summertime in the central part of the beach knows that just because we only have 16 feet and there are big cars parked all along the side, the traffic doesn't go faster than 10, 11, 14 miles an hour. It's very, very slow. It's much, much safer because it's slowed so much. And you could do the same thing at the west end, narrowing it to you know, by putting in the same kind of roadway. I don't know on which side. I haven't given that any thought. And over time, people would use it when they walk. It took like 2 years on New Biddeford Road for people to move out of the main walkway and stop walking 5 abreast. Families, you know, you see families and the parents say, move over, you know, as opposed to them walking totally abreast like they do on every other road at, you know, at Goose Rocks. So I think there's a big opportunity there. I think I sent an email to you guys. It's called Complete Streets. It's a concept that planners use to try to remake streets so that they're available not just to cars, but to pedestrians and bikers. So I think we have an opportunity there, which would accomplish the goals. Traffic would not go as slow as in front of the tides because you wouldn't have those big cars parked all along the road and at the curb, and even, you know, the whole stretch. You've only got like 16 feet, and a lot of the cars don't even fit in the designated parking spots because they're so big. So maybe you have 15 feet, but it forces the traffic to slow down to like nothing, to a crawl.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. And
you have a lot less traffic on the west end. So it would not have the same impact, I suspect, both because you would have the big cars parked and because you don't have a constant back and forth of cars.
Right. So the idea would be and it wouldn't really matter, but on one side, you'd have basically a pedestrian lane. And
Yeah, you
people,
put whatever we've done on Dyke Road and New Biddeford Road, whatever that width is.
yeah,
You know, Lori spearheaded the one on New Biddeford Road. The other one had been done earlier.
Mhm.
And, you know, on New Biddeford Road, the first, the first 500, 600, 700,000 feet, we have parking on one side, which is, designated parking spots. And putting that bike lane slowed the traffic down considerably.
yeah, that's, it gets to the same point. So, and if it's more effective, I mean, I'm interested to hear what other people think.
And I guess the other thing that would be interesting to hear is, I mean, I'm in favor of either or both. I mean, I very much like the idea of the slow pedestrian / bicycle lane. Because that's what people like to do around here in the summer, walk, bike, and we've got loads of little kids who are out there on bikes and learning how to ride bikes in this area. So I am very much behind it. I'm also looking at, though, what is more reasonable that we could get done by this summer, and I think some of that requires talking this again with Chris Simeone, is it?
Yeah, but it was pretty simple. Lori did it in a matter of a month. It didn't require the state. Whatever she did, she made it her magic work.
Okay.
And we had it, we were talking about it at this time and we had it in the summertime.
Okay, well, the other street that I think has a priority for that for me is the Community House Road, simply because there is a lot of foot and bike traffic going to and from the community house, particularly a lot of little kids on bikes, young kids on bikes coming back and forth to programs there. And yet there's a pretty fair amount of traffic coming. It's a pretty, when you come up Proctor and then on to Community House and then on, it's a pretty main artery, if you want to think of anything around here as a main artery, going up from the beach into that whole center area of the East End and out, unfortunately, the back car roads up to the top.
It seems narrower to me, but I haven't measured it, and I can't.
I know. I'm just saying that to me is as because we've had a lot of, as Carol has said and Barry has said, a fair amount of people who historically like to walk on the west end of Kings Highway, and so those would be my two priority areas. And I think it's worth. I am perfectly comfortable with sending a recommendation forward to the Board of Selectmen that we look into, these are two possible ways of either narrowing or improving safety, narrowing and therefore perhaps slowing traffic, as well as improving safety options for people, pedestrians and bicyclists on particularly the Kings Highway West End and Community House Road.
Yeah, I do.
Obviously, leading discussions with Department of Public Works.
If Community House is wide enough, sure.
Yeah, I wouldn't use the word narrowing because it sounds like you want to take something away. But public safety, that's a good word.
Okay. All right, so do we feel comfortable with making this two options that have been suggested to increase public safety on streets that have a lot of sharing of cars, pedestrians, and bicycles, particularly the west end of Kings Highway and Community House Road, without specifying exactly what those, we could put in striping or pedestrian or a pedestrian lane.
I'm in favor of the bike lane. I'm not in favor of striping. I don't think that's worth the effort, personally.
If we could get a bike lane there, I think that would serve both purposes.
Okay.
Yep.
Do we have any thoughts on the bike, Carol?
Carol.
Wasn't it a specialist that told us about the striping? I mean, isn't he a traffic specialist, Barry?
Yes. But I think the idea of, to me, we need one of them. If we could get the pedestrian lane, I think it's even better because it will slow down traffic even more. That's my view. And I think it accomplishes what we're looking at with the striping. if we can't get the pedestrian, then I would want to go back and at least get the striping. That
Okay.
would be my idea.
Okay.
Okay, so anybody else have any thoughts on that? Or pro or con? So we would talk in terms of putting together a recommendation that in the interest of increasing public safety along particularly roads that have a great deal of both vehicular, bicycle, and pedestrian traffic, i.e. west end of Kings Highway and Community House Road, that the Board of Selectmen have DPW look into possibilities of either putting in a pedestrian / bike lane on those roads or at least striping.
Yeah, I think as long as we say our first choice is a bike lane, if it's possible, and our second choice is, then I'm in favor of that.
Okay, well, we'll put the exact wording together when we get, but we've got
And-
sort of pretty
And
much.
be specific. Don't say Kings High. Excuse me, West End and community, i.e., community. Just name those two.
Okay,
But because poor old highway has a lot on its plate, and as we know, it's a long winter and it's hard on our roads. And when spring
Sure.
rolls around, they're going to have a lot going on. So the more specific we can be, the
Mhm.
better our chances of getting this enacted.
okay, all right. I will continue to work on drafting the language here for a future a motion at the end as we wind this all up when we put together our recommendation / motion. So Barry, I think that one's covered. Do you want to?
Yeah, I've got a few more here. This next one, I'm going to, unless somebody violently disagrees with me, I'm going to abandon, and that was the concept of moving the garbage and recycling to other than Saturday. It seems that people are using Noble or going to use a private pickup anyway on Saturday. I don't think we get around the problem. I think we may create more disruption. So I'm perfectly willing to, given the rationale behind that, to forgo that idea at this point, unless somebody else feels very strongly otherwise.
It's beyond our control, Barry. We have a contract
Perfect.
with them, and
Yeah, that too.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
there's no good day to pick the trash up. I mean, it's
Right.
but
Okay.
it's got to go away. And I think the reason behind it was that if we didn't pick it up on Saturdays when people left or are leaving, and I think back to the days when I used to have short-term rentals of my own. The traffic, they would put the trash out and then it would just sit there, and then I'd have to go down and drag it to my own house and stick it in the backyard or wherever. And a lot of places, although under the new rules they'll have to have some sort of a property manager, but I think that was the basic gist of it. It just made more sense so that that people didn't put it out on Saturday when they left and then it sat there until Tuesday, Thursday, Wednesday, or whenever pickup was.
Right. Okay. So we're gonna abandon that idea at this
Yes.
point.
Yes.
The next couple of ideas, I think we probably addressed them. The use of a speed bump on Dyke Road, that could still make sense. Certainly the idea of a speed bump on Kings Highway, I think we've already taken into account with if we get a pedestrian lane, et cetera, you don't need a speed bump. The concept of a speed bump on Dyke Road, though, that's where the water, I was just there the other day, the water came up, the tide and the high tide, where it would have made sense there, that area where there's no homes on either side. That's something that could theoretically slow down some traffic there. If people would, it does work apparently on New Bedford Road.
Oh, it does. Those are impressive speed bumps on New Bedford Road. I mean, we put speed bumps out on our little private, Beaver Pond that does a decent job slowing, but those ones, I make sure I remember where they are.
They
So
weren't cheap either, if I remember correctly.
Yeah,
Right.
that's a question of cost and do we need any sort of input? Paul, you remember, do we need any input from anything other than the town? Has something to do with the state? Has any interest in
It's
that?
not a state road.
Okay,
It's a
all
town
right. I
road.
somehow thought maybe that related to the speed limit. There was an issue
Yes.
with the state at one
Speed
point.
limits is different.
All right,
Yeah.
thank you.
But
So
there is-
clearly, from the point of view of West End, we would not consider it. but potentially Dyke Road to me would be a possibility. I've seen people speeding along there, but I've also seen the police enforcement, and that slows it down. And we do have the speed monitor. So one could make the argument that we've got certain means already in place. It's whether or not we want to go even further.
Why would you not do it on the west? It seems to me that would be the logical place to put it. What am I missing?
It's noisy, and people object to having that. No one was going to want it in front of their house. So at least on Dyke Road, you can put it somewhere where you're really not in front of somebody. So it becomes somewhat less contentious than it would be if it was in the middle of Kings Highway on the west end.
Are the speed limits the same on New Bedford Road as Dyke Road?
So
Posted speed limits?
I think so, 30 and then down to 25.
25, I think that's right.
yeah,
Because I'm just thinking that, and I'm thinking back in my Swiss cheese memory here that, you know, there are certain considerations as to how, you know, where you can put a speed bump as it relates to the posted speed.
Right.
You know, like, you know, we wouldn't put it out on Route 9 where the speed limit's 50, even though people are doing 70, because then it's going to cause a public safety hazard if you hit it doing 70.
Right.
well, in the
I
summer,
mean, that's an exaggerated
Yeah.
analysis, of course, but you get my point.
Yeah.
Yeah, you
The,
can't do it when the speed limit's 30.
You know,
Yeah, and it's
in keeping with my interest of trying to make sure that these things get addressed, I would like to keep the list simple. And and I'm not saying you can't put a speed bump there, and I'm not saying I wouldn't support you there, but if we bring this big list to the Board of Selectmen, I've been on this board for 9 years, and I'm starting to learn a few things. You know, there's such thing as overload when you come forward with things. If you know, I think that everything that we've talked about is certainly legit and warranted. But if we come forward with a list of 20 things or even 10 things, that diminishes the opportunity, you know, where they're just going to say, those people down in Goose Rocks, they want the whole damn world. And, you know, I'm sounding like my father now, but you get my point here.
Pick your battles. I think that's a good point.
Yeah. And again, I got put on, excuse me, I was assigned this committee, and my duty here, I believe, isn't to tell you what to do, but to help you facilitate what you want done, and to, you know, to be a mediator between the larger Board of Selectmen and yourselves. And I would like to see you focused on those things. And I think a speed bump at this point in time, if this was the only thing we were talking about, sure, but it might get a bit contentious, because I think you might even find resistance within your own community.
And I do think because we have that, the warning sign there, I think it does a pretty good job of slowing down that traffic as it approaches the beach, which is really what you're concerned about, where you have pedestrians and, you know, much more activity.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, to me too, this is kind of a fail-safe possibility, something we would perhaps bring forward after, you know, again, being seen to and legitimately trying to other less, perhaps less expensive, because we already have the equipment, such as putting the speed monitor up more frequently over there. I think the idea is a good one. It certainly works on New Bedford Road, but I'm not sure I would see it as something we put forward for this summer. Be sort of like tier 2, if these are other possibilities that the town could look at if we don't see much improvement out of the things we are proposing already, such as far as the speed monitor is, is probably and perhaps the striping, etc. So,
and maybe you ask the chief or Kurt Moses, you know, what perhaps their thoughts are. You know, from my own experience, so I live on Route 9, right in front of the water tower here in Cape Porpoise, and it's only 25 through here, but it's a big straight road. You know, it runs all the way from the town office down here, and it's 35 up the street, but I routinely see people going by. Hell, I see them going by, I swear, 50 miles an hour. Maybe it's not that fast. And the police sit in front of my house every single day, but it doesn't do any good. And it's not, the locals know better. The people who are here know better, but it's the people who come and visit. And maybe they're from New Jersey or New York, or where the speed limits are, and this is, have always lived here. So I have my blinders on here, but I'm told by people who live in other areas where they have real crime, and be thankful that these are our big problems, that the police in their jurisdictions, that speed, if they catch you, they catch you, but they have other problems that they have to deal with on a daily basis. So can we stop that? Speed bump probably would slow them down, certainly get their attention. But again, the things that we start piling onto this list for the Board of Selectmen, I just see that the bigger the list, the less likelihood we are going to accomplish things.
Yeah, and I do think that if we give it time, and some of the items that we think we can implement may well solve our problem without going to the sort of obtrusive, and speed bump does tend to be that.
So
let's forgo that at this
Yes,
point.
Paul.
no, that's the second tier.
Does the speed monitors that we have, do we get data from that, or it's just a one-off?
I was thinking of that when we were having this discussion earlier, and I don't know. I don't. That's a very good question.
Okay.
Because it seems
I can
to me
find out.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me that's really the issue. People have perception about speed. I know the chief did something on Wildwood years ago, and when a lot of people were concerned, and they used some device, I don't know what it was, for a while, and the average speed was much, much lower. He produced a report to the beach committee, and it was way lower than anyone who was talking to us said.
From my own firsthand knowledge. So I say they run traffic literally across the street from my house quite often. So I'll go over and talk to the officer, say hi, see what's going on, how what's going, just be nice. And I can see the radar in his cruiser, and they can read both front and back. And you see a vehicle coming, and you swear it's doing 45, 50, and they're doing 30.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. The perception and the reality, and the chief has told me this, or told the Board of Selectmen this on at least 2 occasions, that the perception and the reality are often very different.
Okay. I don't mean to cut anybody off, but I think Barry's got a few more things, and we're already almost at 7 o'clock, and I'd like to give plenty of time for us to finish up, as well as give opportunity for comments from the public. So I think
Well, I have 2
sort of
more points.
second tier.
Yeah, I have 2 more points here, both of which came from the community. They didn't actually come from our committee, and I guess I feel an obligation to put them forward. And I don't think either one of them is going to really have a tremendous effect, but they could help. One is limiting the hours for any large construction vehicles too early in the morning before people start coming to the beach at 10 o'clock. That's sort of a restraint that we could implement. And the second one would be no overnight parking, make sure that's enforced. So I don't think either one is moving mountains here, but I did commit that I would bring those up to the.
We have discussed overnight parking. I've had that discussion with some of the other selectmen, and when we talk about the new beach sticker policy for this year, I intend to bring that up and see if we cannot, unless people go absolutely bonkers about it, no overnight parking in the stickered areas. That way, in the morning when the sun comes up, everybody has an equal opportunity to come down there. Because while it may be anecdotal and it may not be true, I have heard stories from more than one person that there are people who buy these multiple stickers and then park 1 or 2 cars out in front of their home or in places so that either they can block up those spots and keep people from going to the beach, or they can park their vehicles, since they're taxpayers of the town, for $5. And then when their guests come, they park them in their driveway.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's true, but I think that if we had an overnight parking, because we do in other parts of town, overnight parking bans, Cape Porpoise Pier being one of them, that would give everybody an equitable opportunity to park.
Makes sense to me.
But that's nothing you have to bring up. That's something I intend to bring up when we get to the discussions of the parking stickers for this year.
Okay.
Okay, that's good. And then the other point was limiting the hours for large construction vehicles. Anyone have
I don't
any
know if we can
appetite for
do.
that?
I don't know if we can do that, Barry. I mean, if they are parked in a parking spot, you know, we can't. I don't believe we can differentiate between a box truck that fits in a spot or a construction vehicle that has a sticker, as opposed to somebody from out of town or somebody like myself who doesn't live at the beach or wherever and wants to go down there for the day, and has a sticker. You know, if I have a beach sticker or you have a beach sticker and you want to park, as long as you're within the permitted hours, I just don't see that it would be feasible for us to do that, or even legal.
I agree.
Carol?
I think trying to enforce what we have is a better way to start.
Yeah, I think our main point that landscaping contractors, et cetera, have to obey the ordinances that we have accomplishes it. So I think we're there.
And
I think
we'll
also
certainly
that-
get feedback on that from, you know, and if they want to come forward with a proposal that, hey, if we can be out on the street, but we'll do it between 7 and 9 a.m. We'll get out there and do most of our jobs. But I agree with you that just putting it forward is important. Enforce what you've already got on the books.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I also think that we should tell the landscape people that that this is what's going to happen.
Yeah.
You know.
Yes.
Right, we got to.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Public
Ed,
comment?
I have a question for you.
Yes.
Should we, it's now the 5th of, or the 7th of February. Should we write this up and vote on it at our regular meeting at the end of February? Or should we do this tonight, even though we don't have a nice, pretty, after we take public comment, of
Yeah,
course?
let's,
Yes. When's our next meeting?
21st.
Okay, and when is, I don't have my calendar in front of me. When
Monday.
is the 2 weeks from this Thursday would be what date? 'Cause that's our next selectmen's meeting.
The
No, I think if we
24th.
get to it by March, our first week in March, I think we'll be good.
You'll make it by
Yeah.
then.
And,
Yeah, I
and
would
we'll be in budget then too. That'll keep everybody busy.
And would there be any chance that on some of these that we've talked about, we could have some sort of informal discussions with Chris Simeone? As well as with the police
Um,
department?
I would ask Lori, but I don't see that there's any reason that you can't call Chris up and ask for a meeting. I mean,
Okay,
I don't believe that goes outside the chain of command.
I'll check with
And if
Laura.
they say so, tell them I said you could. I like it when people yell at me because it makes me feel like I'm doing my job.
Okay.
But
All right.
but the ones, Kate, I think the ones we have agreed that we have a consensus on, they were not ones where we felt we had to go and get more input. I
Right.
thought the
The
limited
first
number
three,
of
yes.
ones,
Yeah, they're not going to stripe until May anyways. I mean, the weather just isn't going to allow it. So I think that's really the only one that that would require some boots on the ground, actually.
Okay.
Am I correct?
yeah, they're gonna have to measure that and see whether it
Yeah.
works.
Yeah, and they can do that.
But that's not gonna change our recommendation. We can make a recommendation, and if it turns, the recommendation we made was our preference is to have a bike walk path, and our second choice was to have stripe on the outside of the road.
Too bad Mike Claus retired because you know how much he loves biking. He'd have
know.
gone down and painted it out by hand himself.
But why are we mentioning two, or because if one's, well, why don't we just ask for the bike path?
Just ask for the bike path.
See how that goes. Yeah, that's what we want.
If
Yeah,
it
that doesn't
says it's
go,
not wide
then-
enough, we'll say stripe it. How's that?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going back then. Well, Barry, do we have what about Nobody likes my idea of fun-looking crosswalks.
Yeah, we got a lot of
You're
pushback
gonna-
on that last year because people are crazy.
Okay, that's fine. I don't care.
If you do have crosswalks, I would just suggest that you make them fun. Don't make them political, and I won't even go into political, but just make them fun. Some starfish, some lobsters, some clams,
that's
or whatever.
exactly what I was
you know.
thinking, put a sail or
Yeah.
outline of a
But-
sailboat or a star. No, but and we've seen back and forth on that informally on
Yeah.
whether that's really. But we know that this is not even something we have to make a recommendation on at this point. We know that the town is going to go ahead and repaint all of the crosswalks on the east end, which is where there are crosswalks.
Yeah.
The 11 crosswalks that exist, they will be repainted because they've obviously, they faded out over the year.
If your goal is to slow down traffic, I think having a nice bright white stripe that everybody
Yeah.
recognizes is the
Yeah.
thing to do.
No, I was not suggesting it'd be other colors. I was just thinking it might be fun to put a few little, beachy type of decals in the middle of it.
Well, you can
That's
always
all.
use chalk.
Yeah,
Pardon
right.
I was thinking, go to the art department at the high school and say, these kids can have some community service hours for coming up with,
Give them some sticks of chalk and let them at it.
yeah, it'll all wash away. So we're not even going to go there with that whole idea. We just know that they're already going to do the striping on the existing crosswalks. They'll, brighten them
And
all
as
up.
far as the West End goes, given the issue, so it's my understanding that the whole beach lawsuit got started over one of those. Maybe it didn't get started, but one of the catalysts to really kick it off was people using the private access on the West End. Now, if somebody knows different, please correct me, but this is what I was told by somebody who should have known. So I'm kind of in the camp of, if we put crosswalks down there, then we might be inviting people to go onto private property.
I think that's exactly what we'll be.
Right.
I don't think we can go anywhere about
No.
putting, certainly not by next summer, about
No.
putting, there are too many legal issues that would need to have to be
Yeah.
worked out.
And if it's
It's-
private property, it's private property, and we should respect that.
It's a
Yeah,
shame.
a lot
because
of
I think that
pushback.
would be important, but I hear what you're saying, but it's a shame.
Okay, so we have now come through. Barry, are there any other points that we wanted to throw out there?
I think we've got a good start here, and I think that's where we should go at this point, subject, of course, to public comment.
Okay.
Barry, I'd just like to say, great job of cutting this down to the meat and potatoes of this, because
Oh, yeah.
when I first read it, I was like, you've got to be kidding me. It looked like the Sears catalog from when I was a kid, and you guys have done a great job of distilling this down to what you think was important. So thank you from
you.
myself.
Okay. All right. Can we now just open this up for comments from the community, whoever's out there listening in? Dave, do we have any people wanting to comment or waving hands? I'm sorry, how many, back up just a sec. How many attendees did you say now? Okay, thanks. Okay,
You're
She's
mute-
muted.
Am I unmuted?
You
You
are.
are.
Thank you. I'm Susan from 7 Abbey Road. I'm a backlot owner.
Mhm.
Abbey is off of Winter Harbor out by the fire station.
Yep.
First of all, thank you everyone for all your hard work and putting all of this together. I appreciate it. I think a lot of the suggestions that were made tonight were great, but I'm going to follow Ed Hutchins' footsteps and say
Uh-oh.
less is more. Go to the board with less is more.
Okay,
Pick your battles and I think the you're on the right path, Barry. You did an excellent job whittling it all down, and I think everyone's done a great job, and just work cooperatively with the selectmen. and the speed enforcement, New Bedford Road works out great. When it's on New Dyke Road, that's great too. I don't know how much the speed is affected on the west end of the beach, but I don't live there, so I can't really comment. But thank you all. I think you've all done a tremendous job, and push it forward, and let's hope that we have a great summer in 2022. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you, Susan.
Anyone else? Okay.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Excellent.
Loud and clear.
Thank you, Barry. Good job representing the subgroup. I worked with Barry and Tom over the last few months about this, and so I'm really happy about the advisory committee's endorsement of these ideas. By the way, I am a 20-year seasonal resident right on the west end of Kings Highway, and I can speak to the enormous change in speedsters on that road. And there's been a lot of talk about parking and controlling the traffic. But I will tell you that we have a problem with locals. We have a problem with owners. And I think awareness goes a long way. I don't think people are inherently bad. I think people just don't think about how fast they're driving. And so just having dialogue with folks over the summer and in the fall, I have found has had a tendency of slowing those people down because they're more aware of the fact that they're speeding. So in our part of the neighborhood, there are a lot of renters, there are parents with strollers, there are bicycles, and any amount of speeding is a real safety risk. So while I think the things that you've endorsed are really important, I think an effort to communicate to the owners, the residents, the renters, the vendors, and make this a community priority and enhance awareness. Now, we talked about that, and I apologize. I missed the last advisory committee meeting, and this might have been discussed at that meeting. But I do think that we should work with the communications subcommittee to reach out and let everybody know that as a community, we want their engagement to help us with traffic and safety.
Great.
Yeah, that's great, Art. And, you know, I think the takeaway was let's sort of agree on some of the concrete steps. Let's get the Board of Selectmen, and then we will take those and communicate, you know, through the tax bill and through the agents and as many different ways as we possibly can, through the websites, when people do buy a ticket, etc., to get that word out there. Because totally agree with you, if you put it front row center in front of people, only goodness can happen.
Yep. But good job. Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And to Art's point, if we put up the speed monitoring sign, I certainly know that when I drive around town and I see it and I'm like, oh, I'm speeding, you know, maybe, and usually little old ladies pass me. So, you know, it makes me aware of that. So I think that would be a very good tool to put down there.
Yeah. And Carol pointed out too that this past year, a number of local residents on the West End put little signs, just,
Yep.
you know, I am at Staples or something, signs that a little bit more personal to say. And I do that. I see that at other places when
I think they're great. Drive like your kid lives here.
Drive
Yeah.
like your pet lives here. That's a good one. I've
Exactly.
seen
Pet or
that.
kid. Yeah,
Exactly.
that really works well.
I think there's some good and user-friendly signs that or education that we can come up with once we, you know, we'll get this to the selectmen. But I think that's a good point. Communication and education and getting people involved is going to be very important in this whole process, instead of trying to be a heavy-handed anything.
Yeah, and those are things that you can do as your neighborhood or your community, if you prefer, without the town's involvement, you know, putting those signs on people's lawns, etc.
Yep.
And I think that shows that people care.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks, Art. And again, thanks for all your work on the subcommittee too. Dave, anybody else? Hi. Great.
Okay. Well, I have a comment on two things. First was, there was some talk about it, where we have the temporary crosswalk and the stop sign in front of the store in the summer.
Yeah.
When we do that, maybe that would be a better place, like below the stop sign, which I believe is in the middle of the road, to put the public parking sign, rather than putting it up on the telephone pole across the way. For a couple of reasons. Number one, we don't need the sign in the winter and the off season, you know. And number two, if you're looking at the stop sign, they're more likely to see the sign below it than they may be to look up across the street. Just a thought.
Good thought.
It has nothing to do with the fact I'm working on eliminating sign pollution either.
I know.
Good luck with that.
It has everything to do with that.
We'll get there. We'll get there.
Okay, the other thing was a bike lane on Kings Highway. Is that what the discussion was? I didn't get all of it.
On the west end, yeah.
Oh, just the west end. Okay. Not the other. Okay, then I have no comment on that.
Okay.
Except, other than, I was thinking of in terms of the other end of Kings Highway, the part that goes by the tides, but the only difficulty is you're not going to have them on both sides of the road, are you?
No.
Well, but you have bike traffic in both directions, so how does that help?
Yeah. You just stay in the bike lane and drive carefully. I mean, it's, you don't have room for both sides.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my point. You don't have room for both sides.
Well, it beats nothing at all to heck, I think, is the thought.
And that's common around town, just to have a bike path or a pedestrian path on one side of the
One
road
side.
and not the other. Yeah, there's one in front of my house. And I've never seen two people on bikes run into each other.
Yeah. Yeah, but where you live, isn't it? You said you're on Route 9?
Yeah, right in front of the water tower.
Okay, but you wouldn't have people, I'd be surprised. I shouldn't be surprised by anything, I guess, but.
Don't be surprised by anything. No,
Okay.
definitely not.
But you don't often have, if people are on bikes on Route 9, I imagine they're staying in the same lane that cars would travel in the same direction, yeah?
Yes and no. You know what we have a lot here? Kids on those electric skateboards and the skateboard with the wheel and
Yeah.
you know, that sort of stuff. But it's good. It keeps them over on that side, and as I say, the traffic goes pretty good through here. And when my daughter was young, you know, we used to have her walk through the neighbor's yard and then come down out on Wiles District Road, because walking down Crow Hill was dangerous. There was no sidewalk there, and then they put it in, and it's made a big difference in the number of people I see walking around now.
Yeah.
So I would say that that's a real good place to start, and it's a really inexpensive option. You know, if it doesn't work, what are we out? A few gallons of paint,
Right.
better than what you have now.
Okay, that's all I have to say.
Great.
Thank you.
Fred,
Fred?
wait a minute.
Fred, oh, Fred,
Yes.
I wanted to know where you would put the towing will be enforced. On what sign, where, or how would you help with that signage?
I would put that with the no parking signs.
Or with the public parking sign.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, actually, the problem is somebody could be parked in a legal space, but they don't have a sticker, correct?
No, we're more, I think we're more.
Well, yeah.
Yes.
Exactly.
I think it's more like the signs you put out saying you have a security system. Maybe you don't even have it. It's just that the sign does 90% of the deterrence. Like the thought is just having that towing's enforced to try to just have people think twice about parking illegally.
Yeah, we've done that on
You're
some back up on our private roads here.
Yeah.
And it's
You're not going to be able to tow anybody, because the way the cars are smashed in one around the other, there's no way they're going to tow you out of there.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Towing would more be if they were parked on Bel Air or one of the other
the
roads
side
where
street.
there's no parking.
Yeah. And I don't know how many places there are signs that say no parking on those side streets, to be perfectly honest.
Maybe
And
putting
again,
up a little towing sign wouldn't, you know, like the ADT signs that everybody has in their window. I don't know. Does everybody have a home security system?
Yeah, exactly.
I had to have mine put down last year. He got old.
And I got
Don't
just
tell
got
people that, Ed.
I just
Yeah.
got new stickers to put up on our door that says how many dogs we have inside, or cats.
Right, right.
The cat's bigger than the dog, so but people don't know that at the time. So
Uh,
Yeah.
And their
Great, thank
meeting
you,
night.
Fred.
But
Did you have? I didn't mean to cut off Fred. Sorry, Fred.
Oh, we got another hand up.
Okay.
Okay.
okay. All right, thanks. Yeah, I'm curious, on Dyke Road, cars are allowed to park on the right-hand side just before the bridge.
Right.
And I've
Mhm.
always been surprised by that, I guess. Are those spaces considered part of the allotted number that we have to provide?
Yes.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. All right, that was it. Thank you.
Thanks, Fred.
Good night.
You're muted, Bob.
How do you get to see this, John? Why
There we
can I?
go. Hi.
Oh, you go to participants.
Oh,
Just a quick question on the West End Road. It's a fairly narrow road to begin with, and if you put a bike lane down that road, it's going to narrow the road a bit more. And I do ride my bike down there quite often, and for the times I ride down there, I don't see a traffic problem with that. And the other one is on Community House Road. I do use that road a lot, and it is a congested road with walkers and bikers, but everyone on that road, as far as I have seen, do slow down very well because of the people and bikes on the road.
okay.
So putting a bike lane on those roads, I think, would be a mistake because it would narrow the roads even more.
Well, I guess what the traffic experts are saying, that narrowing the roads helps to slow down the traffic, as well as, of course, if we put a bike/pedestrian lane, try to encourage people to share the roads, both cars moving more slowly and walkers and bicyclists staying to one side and trying to move in single file, or, not to spreading out across the road.
Okay, thank you.
Community house. So, and yeah, I mean, I go up and down that road fairly frequently, and particularly in the summertime, it's just very heavily traveled with kids and bicyclists and everything, walkers. So
Yeah, and that in itself does slow down all the traffic. So I just think adding trying to narrow striping, whatever, but putting bike lanes on those things is going to narrow the roads narrower. And that has been, from what I've heard over the years, a complaint that everyone's saying the roads are too narrow.
okay, I get it.
Yeah,
Narrow them up more just sounds.
Bob, putting the stripe down doesn't physically narrow the road. It only appears to make it narrower and therefore slows the traffic. And I think what we're going to do is, as I had suggested, we're going to talk to Highway about this. I mean, you've been on the fire department for years, so you've certainly seen the results of what happens when people drive too fast and don't play by the rules. So I think it's more a matter of public safety. But I do appreciate your input, because I'm not convinced that the Meeting House Road there is necessary. But I think the West End, where it's a lot longer and it's straighter, would benefit.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
Okay, all right. So let's go back to then trying to put together in a motion form the items that we reached a consensus on and think we'd like to send forward to the Board of Selectmen at whatever their next available meeting, it can go forward.
Hey, were you going to do this tonight, or did you want to take time amongst yourselves to hash these out and then we vote on them at the next meeting? Maybe I misunderstood what you said, and this is your meeting. I'm not trying to take control of it here.
Just give me some input, folks.
That was my suggestion, that we let Barry, in even more abbreviated fashion, come up with the simple steps we were recommending. He could circulate it among the committee, and then we could vote on it at the next meeting, which is only 2 weeks away.
And then you'll have a bigger quorum too.
Fine.
Hopefully.
That makes, that's a good point. Hopefully we'll have a big forum.
Yeah.
I know Joanne always has difficulties with the Monday meetings, but we'll see. She's been doing her best to try and be part of them. Okay, then I'm fine with that. Will give us more time to draft the language of the motion and perhaps maybe even have some preliminary talks with the DPW to see what the feeling
Yeah,
is.
give Chris a call.
Yeah,
Do you have his number?
no, but I'm sure I can find it somehow.
Text me, I can send it to you.
Okay, great. All right. So on that basis, I think, does anybody have any, well, does anybody, I guess we do have on the agenda public comments from things not on the agenda. Do we have anybody out there that wants to make any other comments that doesn't relate to traffic and safety issues we've been talking about? Good, okay. And I don't have any other business to propose tonight. So does anybody want to make a motion to adjourn?
Boy, that'll teach me to step out for a bio break. That was quick. So we decided not to put together a motion then, huh?
Yeah, we thought you know, it isn't gonna kill us time-wise to do it, to think about the language and to put it
Okay.
together, perhaps even to have a chance to have some preliminary talks with DPW, informal talks on the issues we've talked about and narrowing or
All
bike
right.
pedestrian. So, any event, so that's why we thought we'd put off the
Yeah,
actual.
thanks.
And
Sounds reasonable.
hopefully Joanne and Jen will be back and, you know, whether they can participate in voting, given that they haven't heard this, but we'll figure that out.
Good.
We thought, we don't have anybody else out in, community land wanting to comment on other things, so we thought we would, move on and adjourn. If
I make a
somebody-
motion.
Thank you, Paul.
I second it.
Thank you, John. Barry,
Aye.
Ed,
I'd just like to say great work tonight, and I'll say aye.
thank you on both counts. John,
Aye.
Paul,
Aye.
Carol?
Aye.
And I vote aye. I think that's all of us. So we are adjourned and we'll see you on the 21st. And people think about agenda items for that, natural resources, communications, which will hopefully be the primary issues we'll be dealing with that night.
Okay. Good night, all.
Good night,
Night.
everybody.